Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're very excited to have you here today. My name is Costella, and I lead our customer success strategy here at GoodTime, which essentially means I help ensure all of our CS activities and programs support our amazing customers, and we ensure that they attain value and ROI from the GoodTime products and services. And if there's one thing that I love just as much as supporting our customers, it's speaking with them. And so I'm thrilled today because I get to talk and introduce to you all Lindsey Goring, the Global Talent Acquisition Lead for Spotify. Lindsey, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody here today?
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. So yeah, my name's Lindsey. I've been with Spotify for almost 6 years now, which is crazy to say as time has really flown. And I lead our process and infrastructure function within talent acquisition. So what that means is looking at the end-to-end talent acquisition or recruiting process and the systems portfolio that goes along with it.
Oh, wow. That is quite the scope of responsibility. And I know that you'll have a lot to share with our audience today. So thank you so much for being here. And to bring everybody into the conversation, as we've come to learn over the past few years, one size really does not fit all, especially when it comes to where people work. And Spotify really has been at the forefront of revolutionizing how we think about that concept. So in fact, they're an organization that really took work from anywhere to a hugely global scale, which is really cool. And so over the course of this time, we get to discuss for Spotify, what work from anywhere really means. And it isn't somewhere where you go, but rather working is something you do. And I know that you'll explain more about that concept, Lindsey. So I'm excited to get into that. And so I think while this philosophy is really great, one of the things that I think teams and hopefully everybody here on this webinar is thinking about is, it might be a great thing to do in concept, but how do you actually operationalize it? How do you actually get these things done and implement it? And so I'm really thrilled to talk with you about those things and dive into that and talk about how you adjusted your talent acquisition approach to adjust to this Spotify work from anywhere company directive. But before we dive in, I do want to give everybody just a quick overview about who GoodTime is. So a bit about GoodTime. GoodTime Hire is the first and only hiring experience platform that streamlines the candidate experience and enables smart scheduling and scales inclusive hiring experiences that reflect your DE&I goals. And candidates absolutely love GoodTime. And hopefully Lindsey could back this up too, but we've actually surveyed over 27,000 candidates. And we've earned a 4.97 out of 5-star rating. So I have to say that's what I call an experience. And our customers will tell you that the unique and branded experience coupled with putting interviewers and interview scheduling in the hands of candidates really makes that experience awesome. So I want to talk, though, a little bit more about how Spotify actually implements and does really great candidate experience while thinking about this work from anywhere directive. But first, I would love to run a little bit of a poll question. So everybody who's on this, we love making our webinars interactive. Anyone who's on this, what's your company's work style plan? Do you plan to 100% go back to office, 100% work remote? Are you doing hybrid, so remote and office? Are you still evaluating? Are you doing role-dependent types of plans, or are there other? So take a minute or two, maybe not quite a whole minute, but a second or two to fill in that survey now. And this will be a great setup for going into the discussion. And while you're filling in this survey, I do want to make this session really interactive, and I know Lindsey does too. So please, please, please make sure you ask questions at any time. There is a chat, just chat them in there, and we will absolutely make sure that we answer those questions. So don't be afraid, throw them out there.
excited to see what some of the works companies' styles are.
I am excited to see this too. I think this is a really good setup for our conversation because we'll understand, what are the different companies or what are the different styles. So let's make sure you fill in that poll question. Last call, what's your company's work style plan? Office, remote, hybrid, role-based, anything else, we definitely want to hear it as we go into our conversation today. All right, so the results are in, and this looks pretty interesting. So it looks like there's about 5-6% is 100% back to office. There's larger than I would have expected, but 26% totally home or remote, 44% hybrid or remote. Others are still evaluating, so hopefully this will help you think about that evaluation. And then there's some role-dependent plans with some of the folks who answered. So this is really awesome. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And then let's jump in. All right. So when I spoke with Lindsey in our preparation session for this webinar, and thinking about the work from anywhere revolution and how she changed her talent acquisition practices to reflect this new way of thinking on behalf of Spotify, she really broke it down into 4 parts. So the approach, which was understanding your business and strategy; preparation, which is getting the team and the business ready for this change. So understanding various roles, understanding which roles would need to maybe have office time, those that didn't need it, and then working with those teams to not only understand that change, but figuring out where in the execution plan that would happen. And then finally, results, and actually measuring that execution. And then she breaks down the tech stack she used to help do all of this. So that's what we're going to be going over today with Lindsey, leading the way because she has some really, really deep knowledge and expertise in this. Again, we will do Q&A at the end. However, please ask your questions throughout. We want to make this certainly an interactive session as we learn more about how Lindsey actually incorporated this work from anywhere revolution. Lindsey, do you have anything else to add to this agenda, or do we feel like let's jump in?
Let's just jump right in.
All right, amazing. Lindsey, I'll let you take it away.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk to you about our evolution to work from anywhere, and specifically for talent acquisition, what that meant for us. So previously, historically, actually, we were very in-person focused. So from a recruiting perspective, we were relocating a lot of folks to Stockholm, London, New York, and all over the globe, which was super exciting. But obviously, with the pandemic, that has changed quite a bit. Since then, we've launched our Work From Anywhere program, and this is a quote around our philosophy as to why we decided to do this. So work isn't somewhere you go, it's something you do. We give our people the freedom to work where they work best, wherever that may be. And this is just really highlighting our people first strategy, really wanting to, enable our folks to figure out what's going to make them their happiest and most productive self when they do come into work every day. So once the philosophy was set, we then had to figure out, okay, how does one do this? So we do have, it is work from anywhere, but when recruiting, you do want to have some idea where in the world you would want this role to be. So first off, we forecast and we choose a particular region, whether that be Americas, EMEA, or APAC, and then we're able to bucket roles within those different regions. Within those regions, we have different entities or places in which folks can work set up so that there's multiple options for everybody. And then this is where it gets a little bit more nuanced. So we do have some parameters. No matter what, some roles are still going to need to be in office, which we do want to make very clear. But most of our parameters actually are around time zones. And that's specifically because we really value collaboration. It's actually one of our 5 core values. So if you have a direct teammate where you are 9, 10, 12-hour time zone difference, that's an extremely taxing situation on all sides to try to collaborate in case you do ever need to meet. So, to make sure we set up our teams for success, we do try to limit some of our teams within certain time zone parameters for that collaboration aspect. And from a candidate perspective, it's pretty simple. So first you choose your location and then you choose your work mode. So I'll talk a little bit more about work modes on the next slide. But work from anywhere does mean you get to choose where you work from. So as long as it's an entity that we do have a presence in, folks are able to choose so, which is really, really cool because we've seen folks that, are going back to their family roots or going back to where their partner's family roots are. So that's super amazing. And then, our main requirement is that we do ask folks to commit for a year just to make sure that we can set up everything on the back end for them and make sure they're all set up for success. Which then leads me to the second portion, which is work mode. So obviously with COVID, it's a little bit more difficult. Safety does come first. But what we do offer is either an office mix or a home mix. We do know that, even though majority of the population is remote right now, we do see a lot of folks that really want to come into the office and find that they are their more productive selves when they are in an office environment. So we still have our offices available for anybody that wants to come in, or if you're someone that knows you work better from home, you're able to choose. Both you're able to, if I personally like the office, I'm still able to work from home as needed. And same with the home mix. If you do have a team meeting and you want to come in for that monthly team meeting, you absolutely can. Another really cool feature is that if you are in a location in which we don't actually have an office, our GWS, or Global Workplace Services team, will help facilitate what we call a co-working mix, which is kind of like a WeWork type of situation, so that folks, if they do really value that office environment, are still able to get that experience.
Wow, Lindsey, this is really, really, really deep and very, very rich. So I just want to kind of go back and talk about the importance of this approach, and it can't be underestimated. And you've made some really enlightening points. So the key takeaways that I just heard, and I do want to leave some, I saw some questions come in, so I want to get some of those answered as well during our time in this section. But the philosophy takeaways I heard is your company actually needs to choose the philosophy for them. Some companies will just have to be fully back in the office. For example, I remember speaking with a talent leader, chief people officer at Alto Pharma, which is a pharmaceutical, delivery organization. For them, that in-office is pretty important for just what they do. And so it is important to remember companies have to choose the philosophy based on what they do, what their brand promise, and what they deliver. So I love the fact that you opened with your company needs to figure out what's the right philosophy for them. And then depending on your business, the decisions need to be made. How are you thinking about the execution of that? You'll also need to think about, and so by that we mean, hey, when we say work from anywhere, is it fully remote? Is it hybrid? Is it team-based? How do you put some parameters up? And I think you brought up some good examples of, hey, we have to think about time zones. We have to think about collaboration. And so how do we allow for that to occur? And then finally, when you mentioned and saw those, different things that affect teams, like how do you collaborate and teammates, putting up parameters like time frames, maybe no more than 10 to 12 hour time spans. I think that's really important. Time zones is a big deal when you're thinking about global teams. And so I think these are really great insights. So thank you for sharing that approach with the audience. I saw a couple of questions come in. And so, and it's certainly about one of the things that you talked about, like forecasting and regions and trying to pick that out. So one question from Diane, how do you forecast or choose a region? Market mapping question or specific to the function in the area? How do you do that?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. So, for some of our key market initiatives, it's going to be very set. We know what market we want to have that person in because they're going to be launching that market. For others, I would say it's more so based on where leadership would be based and making sure that we have the proper team structure there. So if you have an engineering function where the majority of the engineering teams are in EMEA, from the forecasting perspective, we will try to keep it within EMEA so that way they are still staying together.
I love that. Thank you for clarifying. And I hope that helps to answer your question, Diane. I'm going to move on to another one by Elise. Can you provide a little bit more detail as to why you have your employees commit to a location or a year if they're considered home mix? Is it required to use a co-working space when in the home mix option?
Yeah, both great questions. So I'll start with the second portion. No, you don't need to use a co-working space. It's only if you personally would like to. We have many folks that have an amazing home office set up already, and they're quite happy where they are. So they're all set to go. In terms of the first part of the question, sorry, if you could just remind me what the first part was.
So the first part was, can you provide just more detail as to why you have your employees commit for that year?
Yeah, definitely. So in full transparency, it does have to do with a lot of the back end. So specifically with payroll, tax, different parameters there, different employment laws, different states have different portions of the, an employee contract that need, and well as, if you are looking to move across different countries within EMEA, that's different, different salaries, different, means in which you're going to have to do a lot of extra, hand holding on the back end. So, if situations arise in which there's an emergency and it needs to happen, we'll obviously work with you. But we do ask for a year just to make sure that you as the employee are going to be fully set up in all of your back end infrastructure.
I appreciate that, and it does. There are a lot of back-end implications. I think everyone here can probably relate to that. There was another question that came in specifically about communication around that policy, like your policy of work from anywhere, and it came from Aziz. So how do you communicate, or how did you communicate your policy over time? What touch points were most effective? I do think that as you're creating that change, how did you do that at Spotify? And this will be the last question for this section, because I know people want to dive into more of the section.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first portions of the communication I can't take credit for, unfortunately, but our senior HR leaders that really did help set the strategy were key in communicating it out. So they started with the very top. So working with all of our senior leaders and VPs to really make sure they were anchored and on board with this program. Before going live. From there, it really turned to managers and making sure that they were comfortable, in case their direct reports had questions, if they had any questions themselves about their own offerings, and then from there, launching it to the company. We did have many different info sessions, a playbook in which they were able to look up all the FAQs and questions. And then the other large part is giving folks time. So, you don't want to say, okay, here you go, and choose your work mode from here. We did give them some time to digest, make sure that they had an understanding, could really think about what would make most sense for them before we finalize that process.
Well, thank you, Lindsey. And there are some other questions. I promise we'll do our best to get to all of them. I have them up. We'll move forward, but we will definitely come back to some of the questions asked in this section. So don't anyone worry, and please stick around to hear the answers to some of these questions. Are really awesome. But thank you so much for talking a little bit about the approach. I think that's really important, because that's really your strategy session. But now it's kind of moving into preparation, which I think is really important, because preparation and execution go hand in hand. So let's talk about that. Lindsey, how did you prepare and execute?
Yeah, so I will say, if you are looking to do something like this, it does take months, so give yourself some time. It's definitely not a flip of the switch overnight, even though I know for many, COVID kind of flipped the switch for you to a certain degree. So for us, it really started with, like I said, the senior HR leaders really setting the strategy, setting that philosophy, and anchoring it across our organization. From there, you're going to need to work with a lot of different parties, not even just talent acquisition, but across HR and the company as well. So legal, to make sure that there's any, parameters around employee contracts, any, employment law as you go into new markets. Our HRIS team, who, was focused on not only just tracking our current employee population, but those that are coming in as well and where they would like to be. We had our global workplace services team, which is obviously crucial because we have multiple offerings that they were very gracious and very amazing with setting up for us. Tax and payroll, anytime you do, become more distributed, there's a lot of work that goes into the back end when it comes to different corporate tax and payroll parameters. So I do not envy their job, but very grateful to have them on board. And then additionally, we also really relied on our learning and development and strategy ops teams as well. So it's very easy to get into the weeds of all the compliance, the back end, the checking all the boxes. But when you are focusing on your people, it's crucial to have them involved as well to make sure that any trainings, any company rhythms, anything at all that you were currently operating in a different way, that they are thinking about how to scale this now in a distributed world so that, everybody is included, everybody's aware, and you're not skipping any beats.
I like the idea of a strategy ops team, and I definitely see how cross-functional collaboration by all of these teams is absolutely needed to pull this off.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration, but very grateful for the team I do have internally. And then, so for me, I am in the talent acquisition space. So I very much focused on our TA team. And what I can say is training, training, training. So we had a lot of different means. We had in-person trainings. We had Google Docs in which folks could ask their nuanced questions. We had Slack channels in which folks were collaborating to help each other with answers, office hours, many different means. But one we actually are, piloting right now that I'm personally super excited about is something called a Fika and Learn. So we are Swedish, and Fika is Swedish for coffee breaks. So rather than a lunch and learn, we tend to have Fika and Learns internally. We have a very seasoned global team, which is awesome. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was highlight different team members and their experiences. So we asked different recruiters that have recruited in different markets like Canada, Italy, France, LATAM, to actually present to our team. And the premise was, if you were recruiting in this market for the first time all over again, what did you wish someone would have told you, whether it be a benefits pitch, where to source from, how to, if there's any nuances that just come about that you weren't aware of. And that's been really, really great. It's also been a great opportunity to bring in any local HR partners, GWS, any support systems for those areas to put faces to names and have, them be very approachable for our team and they know who their resources are. The other portion that you're going to need to really think about, partner with, or if you don't have this team separately, think about yourself, is employer branding. So anytime you have a policy, it's going to be very, very long, and that's not something you're necessarily going to present to candidates. So our employer branding team was crucial in making sure our career site was ready, everything was ready, and that we are packaging this in a very digestible way for candidates to understand. So different one-pagers, different, even illustrations, somewhat that you've seen on this deck, to illustrate what exactly their offerings are. And then another key portion that we worked a lot with for employer branding on was our career site. So that's lifeatspotify.com. We do actually have an entire section around our Work From Anywhere program that recruiters can use in outreach, or candidates that do want to dive more into information have those resources. But the other portions that we really needed to think about were around how to advertise our job postings. For anybody that's gone on this journey, there is a lot of different, ways in the market, to a certain extent, some job boards that you might either have your career site scraped from or that you advertise to might not have fully caught up to what you're looking to do yet. So we went back and forth quite a bit. But where we landed on is having both a city and a remote tag. One, because we are offering both and we want to cater to those that want both. But then also making sure that, any job boards are geo-targeting to those folks. So we use different talent insights to make sure that we're targeting different markets, new markets where we think these talented folks may be. But then also having that remote tag as well. So if you're someone that is rural, they're going to stay at home, they're not coming into the city, they're able to filter by that as well. And then within our job postings themselves, we have what you'll do, who you are, and now we've added where you'll be. So for that, it's a little bit more information about what our Work From Anywhere offerings are, linking to more information, but then also that fine print. So if there is, that in-office requirement or that time zone, constriction just due to the role, this is where we can really spell it out for folks so they know before they're hitting that apply button.
I think that's really key. And I love your insights here as well, Lindsey. So we talked a little bit again about the approach, and then this was the preparation and execution. And I think the highlights that you brought up are really, really important. And so when I think about the key insights here, it's collaboration. It has to be key up front. You have to think about all of the cross-functional groups you need to work with to really execute this, because it's not just talent. It's obviously going to impact a bunch of different areas. And so big change always requires that cross-functional collaboration. And I love that you brought up that point here. The other piece that I really loved is the idea that as you are focused in your particular area of change, training, like you really need to focus on understanding the questions and nuances that come up from your own team and identify from them like different concerns they have or nuances. And I love the idea of doing coffee and learns, or fika, if I'm saying that correctly, and learns, which is really nice. It's yes, it's more of an informal way. I love it. I think we should adopt that here at GoodTime, fika and learns, to start sharing information, gathering more concerns for particular areas, getting those questions answered before you go to launch. And you'll get more and more questions as things launch out. But if you can do that prep in advance, super, super important. And then finally, I loved your tip about outside organization impacts. I hadn't really thought about this, but it is really important to think about, okay, well, what platforms do we use to actually advertise or talk about our jobs? And maybe some of these platforms haven't quite adjusted to the way we want to advertise about them. So I love the idea that you worked with your branding team to really figure out how could we make this very specific, that it is remote, or how can we make sure that people can choose or understand our culture and philosophy? So really trying to figure out how do we externally communicate this new company philosophy and way of thinking and where we're going with it. So I think that that was a really good tip and something that I think everyone could benefit from. I do want to take a moment to also answer a couple other questions. And please, if you have questions, ask them now. I mean, we have such a wealth of talent and information with Lindsey here with us. So definitely want to make sure we get those answered here. One of the questions that did come up in the last section was about comp. So this came from Marty, and he said, thank you for hosting this. I have a question about your comp philosophy supporting your talent and location strategy. How are you approaching compensation? Are you doing it by role and by geography?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a compensation team internally that does a lot of this work. I'm kind of lucky in that I get to see the end result. But yeah, so we do think of it by role as well as by geographical location as well. So there's a lot of market data that you're able to buy out there to then able to benchmark based off of the geographical location and the role, what kind of banding would make most sense for you. You know, within the US, I know a lot of people, there's a lot of debate. Some are doing it by zones, people are doing it on a national scale. There's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice it, but I think the most important thing is to look at that data first to make sure that you are competitive within your market space.
No, it's a really, really great point. And I think that, you know, like you said, I think being able to get that information from the comp teams and trusting like, hey, they're doing a really great job. And then just being able to feedback, how is that working, is really important. And so thank you for sharing that insight. We have a couple other questions. How do you get visibility for roles when you don't advertise a location? And then what are some of the practices, best practices for job postings in work from anywhere?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few different means, and you know, in all honesty, sometimes we're also A/B testing to figure out what's the best way to get it for us. So, you know, one is that we do look at our talent insights to know where pockets are. So specifically, if there's a new pocket that we haven't been able to explore before, you know, like maybe Paris for the role, that you are able to pick that city and advertise to that city specifically. Another means is adding a hashtag remote within the job description. So that way with a lot of job boards, sometimes that's how it gets picked up. And then the other is really also just highlighting our work from anywhere program so folks know that there are options. So maybe they're not seeing that role on that particular job board, but if we're talking about our work from anywhere program within all of our job postings, then they're able to see like, oh, well, maybe not this one, but maybe there's another one for me, and then go to our website.
I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And I like the idea of, you're also using this as an external communication so people can check out, maybe not from these job boards, but your website yourself, the website itself, and understanding the philosophy. As you mentioned, being specific about the roles that maybe are more in office and having some more information there, but for the ones that are work from anywhere, really driving people to that site. So really, really interesting insights. I do want to keep moving us forward, but this was a really great area. So let's just summarize where we are for everybody who's on the call. We talked a little bit about the approach. That's the strategy portion, especially when the company directive is, we're going to work from anywhere. You really have to, gather and think about, okay, if this is the company directive, I have to strategically think, how is this going to impact me and my team? And how are we going to think about the people that need to be involved, which goes right into preparation. After you strategically think as a company, this is the directive we're going to do, how does it impact us? You've got to get the right people in the room, which is part of that preparation. You have to do a lot of cross collaboration to figure out where in our systems, where in our people, where in our processes do we need to change to adapt to this new philosophy. And that goes with execution, that goes hand in hand with execution, which is that training piece and making sure that as you roll out these changes with the teammates who've identified the changes that need to occur, making sure you train people, you get their Q&A before you roll it out completely. And so I really think that you've really set this up well to now talk about some of the results. So I would love to hear, how are things going for you, Lindsey?
Yeah, they're going well, which is really, really exciting from a hiring perspective. For us, we now have a whole new pool of folks that we can source from, that we can hire from. So my team was very, very excited. So on top of seeing an uptick in applications and an uptick in visits to our career site and LinkedIn pages, we were able to unlock a lot of hiring in key areas, like mobile engineering and some of our more niche roles that, we would constantly have to relocate people for and, offer and sell a lot of these aspects. We now have an additional tool in our tool belt to really help close that deal. The other thing, and, I know I mentioned earlier that we were very in-person focused before. We had been tracking, those that had said, would love to interview with Spotify, but I'm not moving right now. So, or, with COVID, now might not be the right time. I know a lot of people were very shy, just knowing where the world was headed. But now with this, we were actually able to revisit those past candidates through a sourcing strategy to actually say, hey, we now have this offering for you. You can stay where you are. Would you like to now re-interview for us? And that was a lot of really great, as I like to call, nothing's ever easy, but easy wins in the recruitment space for our team.
I really, really love some of those pieces and insights here around, the results. Here you are able to open up new markets of people, which is amazing. You get to go back to people who otherwise would have turned down Spotify and really attract different types of talent to the team. And it sounds like that's serving Spotify quite well.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think just also for, any of our teams that we're looking to hire quite a bit, it was a lot of like, okay, we can hit the ground running. We have a lot of candidates in the pipeline now, which is every recruiter's dream, really.
Oh my gosh, I bet. I like, and don't I know? We had an interesting question come in that is definitely related to some of the preparation, but also the results as well. So a question came in from Christy. And it is, will your policies ever accommodate someone who prefers van life, like people who are nomadic and not in a particular place for very long?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, at Spotify, I say never say never. I do know one day we want to expand the program as much as we possibly can and, accommodate for that. I think, unfortunately right now, a lot of state or country level policies don't always allow for that, just with some of the back end work that needs to go into it. But, I think if we could find a way and, knowing just kind of our culture, I know that that's something, innovation and just trying new things is something we love to do. That would be awesome. So hopefully one day.
I do love that. And I do think it's just knowing some of the back end of some of the HR pieces as well. It can be really difficult now, but technology might actually help enable us to have a lot of those things be automated or to be done easier, because you can't underestimate the back end. I think all of us know that, like both in, the activities and things we're doing as talent leaders, but also the things that once that talent gets through the door, benefits, payroll, all of that, all the things that you're talking about, those can differ by obviously different locations. So I think technology certainly should evolve to help us do that in the future. And I know that there's going to be many who are going to be at the forefront of that. And
Absolutely.
So, speaking of technology, I know that you've definitely used different tools to support you in the endeavor to really move this talent global, remote, and really drive that work from anywhere throughout your talent organization. Can you talk more about the tech stack you used and how you worked through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were very lucky that, our internal teams did have a lot of tooling already in place to allow us to do this. So we're mostly on G Suite, but we also use Slack quite a bit, as well as Workplace. And this allows folks to be engaged, come in and out of Slack channels, come in and out of Facebook Workplace conversations when appropriate for their time zone. I also personally love the new feature with Slack where you're able to delay send the messages. So if I have someone where it's very late for them in Stockholm, I can time that message to go out the next day. The other piece that we are piloting right now is an overlay on top of our ATS lever that allows for different flows and extra help for folks. So, sometimes when you're in office, if you're new or just, confused, it's nice to kind of tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, how do I do this? And what we're looking to do is actually build a flow so that, someone will say, no, click here, now click here, now click here. So allowing folks, if they don't have someone within their time zone, or if, they can't set up that extra meeting that day, to still get the help and support that they need.
Oh, I love that. That sounds really fantastic, actually.
Yeah. And then, fun fact, we actually did implement GoodTime during the pandemic, and it was our first tool in which we implemented fully remote. So it was a great success, and now we know that we can implement anything fully remote as well, which is great. So GoodTime does a lot of stuff for us. It's something that I had actually been trying to get for our team for a while. But one thing, especially as you do go distributed, that becomes more and more complicated, and I've said it a few times already, is time zones. And so specifically, if you are a coordinator or have been a coordinator and you have a candidate in one place and the panel's split among multiple time zones beyond that, you're sitting there doing a lot of math. You then have, Europe that does daylight savings different than the US. Some folks in the US don't do daylight savings at all. So it's a lot of room for error. What this really allows is actually for both the interviewers and candidates' time zones to be fully accounted for and automated, not only saving our coordinators time, but really eliminating those potential embarrassing mistakes when you're just 1 hour or 30 minutes off, which, no one wants to be. No one wants to have those miscommunications when it comes to a candidate experience. So that's been awesome for us.
I'm really glad to hear that, and definitely feel you there. As someone who's done the calendar Tetrising in the past, I can say that those mistakes really can affect the other end, the candidate and their experience, not to mention be a little bit confusing internally as you're scrambling to get people in the right time zone or in the right time slot to run the interview. So I can certainly appreciate the pain points there.
Definitely. And so this is actually my last point. I'm going to wrap it up and go full circle with another quote from our philosophy. With any change management, it's a lot of work, and it's very easy to just find yourself in the weeds, especially for recruiters that are dealing with different candidates. So it's always important to zoom out and remember the why you're doing this. And no matter what your why is, everybody's why is going to be different. That helps your team drive it forward and be so much more powerful when they're explaining it to candidates, and just really have that passion show through. So this is us from a work from anywhere perspective, and excited to see where it takes us in the future.
Oh my gosh. Well, Lindsey, this has just been absolutely phenomenal. I loved how we started with the strategy and the approach and the idea that this directive came out, and it was like, hey, we're going to work from anywhere. And really thinking about how that can work for Spotify as a business. And so it's really important to think about that. And that's your approach. And then moving into your preparation and execution, it's really about that cross-functional collaboration and diving into training and making sure your teams understand that. They understand the why, as you just put it, and really can get behind that why, but also figure out the how. And then going into the results, it's actually opened up so many more people and so much more talent that you can tap into, which is really, really great. And then finally, none of this happens without having a tech stack. So your ATS, your collaboration tools, your hiring platform, and making sure your candidate experience is really great. All of those things really matter in the full execution of this. And so I think we all learned a ton. I am definitely excited to get some more questions from the audience, especially if they have them.
Yeah.
So I have one question, and this has to do with a little bit more on the training side. How have recruiters adapted to the change all of this brings to them?
Yeah, I will say it's definitely not an easy feat. They now have a lot more to learn, especially as you do go more globally. But I will say for many, it's a new, exciting challenge to call yourself a global recruiter, to really have that global experience. And then the other portion as well is you just see so much more collaboration. If someone says, hey, has anybody ever recruited in Brazil? I need help with this in our Slack channel. I can say my team is amazing of jumping in saying, I've done that, I can help you, I can hop on a quick call with you. So it's a really great way to also get your team connected for those that, they might have never talked to before, especially if they are remote, when there is that collaboration and questions coming up. So I'm super proud of that. I
definitely appreciate that. Yeah, I bet. I mean, to be able to push this such a big change, and I think the way you had talked about it a little bit before, that collaboration, again, with the Fika chats was really, really cool and very powerful because you can get those tips and tricks and then also solve for those issues that may pop up across the team.
Absolutely.
So I think we have one more question, and this has to do with maybe Spotify as a whole and around employees. So how is Spotify maintaining connection and visibility for all employees? Is there a difference for those that work in office versus somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, this was one of the things of why our learning and development, some of our internal teams were so crucial, because they really were tasked with being mindful of how to make sure everybody is included. So an example is that orientation, we are now doing it fully remote, so that way everybody's included on a level playing field. We have different means internally, like workplace, like email, in which we are very focused on a digital route to make sure that everybody does have visibility to all opportunities and all news as well.
Oh, I love it. Really, really. And we had one last question come in, so I want to make sure we get it answered. Has your team talked about how these policies might evolve in a post-COVID world? If we can even dream of one. Do you anticipate keeping this location flexibility or gradually rolling it back?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one that everybody's on their mind, because I think everybody's wanting that post-COVID world definitely as well. But what I will say is, definitely not rolling it back. I think more so seeing if we can expand it even further, in all honesty. So for us, we are definitely thinking about it. But our priority right now is focusing on the safety of our current population. So that's really been our main focus, especially, with unfortunately a lot of the variants on the rise. So that's been our primary focus, but hopefully one day expand further.
I love it. Well, we're just out of time, but this has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much, Lindsey, for joining us today and sharing your experience with really taking this directive at Spotify of work from anywhere and really making it a reality, and specifically diving into the things that you needed to think about in the talent team. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And certainly, if you have any suggestions for webinar topics that you'd love to go over, we would absolutely love to take your feedback. And we definitely want to make sure that we cover those topics with you. And will there be a recording available? Yes, we will. We will actually have these recordings available, and we'll be making a lot of this information available, certainly over time. And then if you want to learn more about GoodTime, if you're unfamiliar, definitely visit our website. Please visit our demo page and just get a demo. It's pretty awesome, and I think it supports teams well, just like our Spotify customer here. So again, thank you, Lindsey. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, bye, everybody.